Good evening. Welcome to this May 3rd, is it? May 3rd meeting of the Middle School Building Committee. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everybody. Happy spring. There's been a whole lot going on. We'll jump right to some updates. But first, we've got an approval of meeting minutes from the last meeting. So, Mark?
Yes, for meeting 19, meeting packets were sent out with the meeting minutes, so we're looking for a motion to approve.
So do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
I just have one correction.
Let's get the motion seconded first.
I'll second.
Second, thanks. Jennifer?
If you can just change the title after my name.
What page are we looking?
1.
Okay, yes. Ooh, yeah, I changed, okay, missed that one. I changed it the last time.
Can you add me on the attendance?
So there was something.
Okay, we'll do.
It looks like it was. So we'll put Mrs. Busick, Stacy Busick, in between George Binns and Janet Chrysos. And that would be your title that was mistakenly placed after Jennifer's name. Correct?
Correct.
Don't want to get the wording wrong. You got that, Mark?
Yes, I do.
Stacy Busick, Director of Special Education. And Jennifer, what should it say after your name?
It says school
Beverly
building.
School Committee. Member. Building Committee member.
School Building Committee, right.
Similar to the others.
Okay, thanks. Okay, anybody else?
Could we also change Mrs. Visnick's name? She's a Beverly School Committee member.
Well, Jennifer is now too.
I'll be. Come on down.
Oh, yes.
Beverly School Committee
Right.
member. Okay. Beverly School Committee. Gotcha. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. Thank you. Mark, let me turn it over to you.
All right, so I'll make a few brief OPM remarks. There's a project budget update included in your packages.
Mark, just for anybody watching at home who's not used to watching who you are and what your role is, we'll do that for the camera.
Okay, good evening. My name is Mark Lydon. I work for HERE International. I'm serving as the project's owner, project manager. I'll give a little bit of an overview of budget and schedule. So again, repeating with respect to the budget, there's a copy of the updated budget in the package. We're continuing to track on budget. There's an amendment to add the scope of work that was recently bid out for the site enabling work, as well as the driven pile work. So that will increase the construction contract value by $5,072,745. The current CM contract amount is $13,339,610. And again, that's tracking to the estimates and the budgets so far. There's also a master schedule update included in your package. And again, for any of you who have driven by the building, you'll see that the building is down, the existing original memorial building. The abatement is complete. The site contractor and the pile driving contractor have started to mobilize, and you can see some of their equipment on the site. The testing company, UTS, and the geotechnical engineer were out on site at the perimeters collecting background information with the seismograph, so we have background information before we start the site work and the pile driving contract work. They tabulated information on both the Auburn Road portion of the site as well as the Blaine Ave area. We have the estimate for the 60% construction documents currently being done by Heary's estimators, Bacon Agostini's estimators, and AI3, the designer's estimators. We'll receive and we'll reconcile those estimates on Thursday of this week. The Hearing engineers, Bacon Agostini staff are reviewing the package. They'll provide review comments as well as value engineering, value management suggestions. Heary and the commissioning agent, and again, the commissioning agent, BR Plus A, was hired and paid for by the Mass School Building Authority. They have completed their commissioning review, and I distributed those comments today. The current plan is to submit the 60% construction document package to the MSBA on May 11th. And again, for that, we will be seeking a vote a little bit later this evening. The pile cap, grade beam, and site and structural packages are out to bid for some of the follow-on work. Those bids are expected to be received on May 18th, I believe. And again, Bob will speak to a little more detail about the current and proposed construction activity. We're still on track to start the pile cap work on July 1st, even though there's been some adjustments and the pile driving itself hasn't started as quickly as we might have liked, but it's not impacting the overall schedule, and hopefully we'll start next week. All right, so any questions with respect to overall budget or schedule?
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Relative to the pile driving, excuse me, how many pieces of apparatus are they using for drivers?
There'll be the large crane that you see out there will have the hammer attached to it, and I think they have another crane, right?
They'll have a crane that feeds the operation, but there's only going to be one machine driving piles on the site.
Are there multiple locations where they could bring another machine in to catch up on schedule?
I don't think you're concerned with schedule.
No.
You want to just explain that?
I have a slide in my portion of the presentation where I'll walk through the schedule, and you know, we've done a couple of the abatement and cleanup things, took a little bit longer than we thought, so I'll go into some detail unless you want me to explain it now.
No, it's fine.
Other questions for Mark or based on Mark's report? Joe?
Thank you. Mark, you said that the pile driving in the early packages bid came in for a little over $5 million?
That's for the initial site enabling and the driven pile
How
package.
does that compare to the estimates that you got the pile so far?
Okay, the pile driving piece by itself was, I believe, $750,000 roughly under the budget. Okay, now we modified the scope of work so that because of the clay, the underlying soft clay, we modified the bid scope of work to put in a gravel stone platform so that we would not have an experience of the pile driving crane, the driver settling or, you know. But now that we've seen that the area, not today, but last week, the area dries out rather well, Bob's looking at an option of maybe doing something a little bit different that will reduce it. That price came in higher than the estimate, but again, the estimate wasn't specific to just that scope of work, so we have the entire site work package that we'll have a better idea at the end of the reconciliation where the project stands overall from an estimating standpoint at the end of the week.
Right. But the pile driving itself?
The pile driving itself was, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
So AI3 has a little bit of a presentation to show what they and the team has done to date since the last meeting.
Thank you, Mark, and for the television audience. My name is Scott Dunlap, Troy Randall. We're both partners and principals with AI3 Architects. Have been involved with Beverly and the middle school project since inception. Tonight, we're going to, as we did at the last building committee meeting, we're going to give a brief review of all the major things that have happened since the last building committee meeting, and then talk specifically about some of the items within that work. So The summary slide is up. The very first item is actually a series of abutters meetings that were held, and I'm going to ask if Mayor Cahill would like to provide some opening comments. He set up those meetings for us. It allowed us to communicate with the abutters, so I'll...
Sure. Thank you, Scott. As you folks know, there were some concerns raised by residents of the Auburn and Columbia Road neighborhoods. Mrs. Silverstein, City Councilor Jim Latter, and I, and some other councilors joined in, met with the neighbors numerous times, have met with the neighbors numerous times, did a site walk with our team, and were able to make some adjustments. So it was really a good process where they raised some concerns, we listened, they made sense. We were able to make some significant improvements in terms of both positioning of the depot on the overall campus within the project, and also a bit of a scale down. If I remember, it wasn't so much. Yeah, you'll explain it better on some of the parking that we're able to kind of turn the depot as well as pull it further away from the neighborhood, and ensure that visually, I don't think they'll see much of anything, as opposed to what they might have as we were originally looking at positioning it. So I think it's been a good process, a good outcome, and really appreciate all the work that's gone into it from our team, and also appreciate the neighbors for their, both their advocacy and their understanding of what we need to accomplish. So, Scott.
Well put. We'll show specifics to the committee just because it did adjust the site plan as part of our presentation tonight. We'll talk more specifically about what that involved. I'm going to ask Troy to just sort of go through some of the other updates.
Yeah, the next item on the list here is the geotechnical structural coordination meetings. There are a series of meetings over the last few months that occurred to refine the geotechnical and the structural component of the proposed pile depths, grade beams, existing pile locations, utilities, settlement analysis, and pre-charging analysis. Involved Agostini, our site consultants, civil engineers, structural engineers, as well as geotechnical engineers. And that series of documents, or the bid package related to the work there, is out to bid, as Mark mentioned, and that's wrapped up at this point. The next item, the police and fire.
I just want to add to that because it plays into something Mark said earlier. We often forget about the process that led to kind of where we are, and Joe helped us highlight the cost savings. But as a reminder, at one point in time, the project budget was holding between $5 and $6 million to address potential piles on this site and the structural support of the building. And in working through the process with the building committee, we've discussed all kinds of different options and considered all kinds of different scenarios. The actual number, which is, as Mark mentioned, is $750,000 below the last estimate, but is at $3.7 million. So it's come along. It's just continually worked its way down to the point where it finally locked in at $3.7 million, which is really a small amount when you think about the size and magnitude of the building. So I would just say thanks to everybody collectively who's been involved in that process as we continue to discuss it and make decisions about that, because it really is construction management at risk process working, where the owners talking with the design team is working with the contractor to try to come up with the best solution for the building. And that was, in our minds, that was a really big victory for the project. And these last geotechnical and structural coordination discussions were a big part of that. So.
The next item, the fire police coordination meeting, meeting with the reps in the city, as well as our engineers, going through building and site security, going through access to the building, access to the site circulation, command centers, Knox boxes, all the detail related to their portion of work as a result of the progress through the design of the 60% CDs. The next item, the bus depot coordination conference call. That was specifically related to utility discussions, all the services going to that building, whether it's the water, the sewer, the electricity to that building. The next is the Revit Clash Detection Coordination Meeting. As you guys have heard several times in the past, there have been, through the entire process, very specific times that the Revit model with the mechanical, fire protection, the plumbing, structural, all the architectural components, all are combined within a single model, and clash detection reports and analyses are completed. That is one that has, this meeting is one step in the process. Those continue to occur along the way.
At the last, just a comment on the next item, at the last building committee meeting, we reported that we weren't quite ready to update the committee and had some ongoing meetings with regard to the student personal storage areas, specifically the lockers or location thereof. And so since that, we appreciated the committee's patience on that, because since that point in time, and even before that, we had asked Matt and the superintendent to go back to the staff and administration and talk through and have some open discussion about what the best solution was for the storage of student items. And since that time, we've done mock-up, we've done analysis, we've talked about other school districts. There's been a lot of discussion back and forth. And tonight, as part of our presentation, we're going to update the full building committee on some of the solutions that came out of that. But again, want to thank everybody who was involved in that, because we kind of asked everybody to go back and start from scratch with asking the tough questions about what would ultimately result in a good solution. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in our presentation.
The signage discussions, we've had a series of signage, primarily code-related signage, wayfinding, room ID signage, and graphics throughout the building with the administration that's included within the 60% construction documents. Conservation Commission meeting, as Mayor Cahill mentioned, with the adjustments to and improvements to the bus depot facility. The Conservation Commission met to approve that as part of their process and the permitting. The 60% CD commissioning specification from the commissioning agent. We've had a series of discussions and conference calls with them and their review of our documents. You may recall that we do an in-house building envelope review of the construction documents. We also have an outside source to take a look at the exterior envelope review. The commissioning agent also does a review of the exterior envelope, and they have provided us with comments. They've provided us with the commissioning document that's included within the specifications that you see in front of you on building systems, as well as the building envelope, two specific and distinct specification sections within the documents there. Also, the next item, speaking of building envelope, we've had a few conference calls and discussions with NGRID. You may recall that NGRID has been involved in the process since the preliminary design process or phase of the project. We have had a series of discussions, most recently with the conference call a few weeks back, which discussed specifically the integrated design path study report that they produce, independent of our consultants' work in looking at the lead requirements. There were, and that is primarily related to incentives and rebates that they will provide the district at the end of the project, at the end of the design process. There were energy efficiency conservation measures that were designed or that were discussed in detail related to the building systems, related to the high-efficiency lighting, the energy efficiency cooling systems, the chillers, the CO2 detectors, building envelope. And in talking through each of the 9 commissioning measures, conservation measures, there were a few that were highlighted as being over and above what they typically see. One was the efficiency of the building envelope. 2 was the watts per square foot, or the average lighting density of the building, as well as the air-cooled chiller and the efficiency related to that. All 3 of those contributed significantly to the energy efficiency of the building, the envelope, and the overall savings. If you recall, at the last building committee meeting, we reported about a 21% efficiency, greater efficiency savings over the baseline. That is higher now. So it's as we continue to refine the detailing and refine the systems, the building systems, the mechanical, electrical, and mechanical, electrical primarily. Plumbing is a separate topic. It's about 26% now. So we continue to improve the overall building efficiency as we refine the detailing and continue through the construction document process. The next item, ADA accessibility review, standard throughout the process. There was one at the beginning of the project during schematic design, a more detailed review by our consultants, Kessler McGinnis Associates, as part of the this upcoming submission, the 60% construction document set. That's to make sure that all of the detail, both site and building, are compliant, ADA compliant with Massachusetts Architectural Access Board regulations. Door hardware, conference call with the city and our consultants related to door hardware to talk about the specifics of the management system, the keying, the types of hinges, the types of cores, and work through the details of that component. Bob and I met with the building commissioner 2 weeks ago and talked through with building commissioner the detail of the permitting process, the documents, and the early packages. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add. You don't necessarily need to, but.
One of the reasons why we met with the building commissioner is we're anticipating a potential change in the building code July 1st. So we're in a position where we're working on early packages right now under the 8th edition because the 9th edition doesn't exist yet, but when the bid documents for the building come out in September, we'll be under the 9th edition. So we worked through some of the challenges with that. We got the documents submitted. We're working on getting a foundation-only permit right now so that we can do the piles and we can start thinking about foundations starting July 1st. And I think it was definitely a worthwhile meeting. And we have filed the permit application last week so that we're up to date with our application as it goes through the city.
The intent is for Agostini Bacon to file the full building permit after the documents in September, the end of September. The 100% documents have been completed and ready for bidding. And the transition, as Bob mentioned, with the 8th and 9th edition is supposed to be July 1st. We'll know exactly if it has been approved by the BBRS, the Board of Buildings, and we'll know more at that point with the 9th edition. But the 9th edition, in general, is more stringent than the 8th edition. So we're trying to look forward and design to a more stringent code, and so that's part of the process with the discussion with the building commissioner. As I mentioned, the clash detection, there was a 60% coordination of the clash detection. This one in particular was specifically related to the 60%. And one of the things that MICAD, who is the consultant that we're using to assist us with the modeling of the Revit model, they have worked on many, many projects with with Revit, and significantly sized projects. And they mentioned, just mentioned, it's sort of a pat on the back with the construction and design team. At the number of clashes at this point in the process was significantly lower than what they see on a typical project, which is fantastic, because it just means that everybody is coordinating and working through the process efficiently and effectively. The next slide just identifies. At the last meeting, we had a slide that identified not specifically what occurred during discussions or meetings, but this slide identifies on a daily basis we're coordinating with all of our consultants, whether that's mechanical, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, or structural, geotechnical, theater, the food service. This includes the series of individuals or consultants that we have been coordinating with, which includes a larger number of consultants than the prior meeting, based on the document and its status during the stage of the process. The next slide is related to as we building product representatives for manufacturers. As part of the construction document process, we get into significant amount of detail, obviously, to construct the building. And as part of that process, we evaluate variety of materials, a variety of detailing options for components of the building. And this, just as far as the last few months, we've had a series of manufacturers come through, representatives come through to our office to look at the specifics of the project, detailing reviews, and materials, whether that is technology related, epoxy floor, Wenger for the for music instrument storage, lighting solutions, the Nichiha manufacturer for some of the exterior envelope and exterior skin, brick companies for the natural stone material on the perimeter of the building, roofing manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. And as Mark mentioned earlier, we've submitted to the estimators the 60% construction document set, which includes 484 drawings, as well as nearly 3,500 sheets of specifications. You can see the documents on the small table there. That's not two copies of the same thing. It's the entire package, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the specifications, Volume 1 and 2 of the drawings. And then also, as Mark mentioned, with early package 3, structural steel, civil, and landscaping package was released on the 19th of April, and we are anticipating the bidding to come in shortly.
We'll talk in a little bit more detail about a couple of those items now, starting with the personal storage units for the students. For those of you who were advocates for locating such things outside of the classroom in the corridors, you can breathe a sigh of relief. They will be located outside the classroom in the corridors. We ask, as I said earlier, the school administration to take another look at that, and I'm going to sort of summarize, Troy and I are going to kind of summarize the conclusions that we came to ultimately, and then certainly Dr. Hershey or Matt, if you guys want to comment on the process, because I know you invested a lot of time in soliciting input and providing input back to us. But
Scott, I just want to interrupt you for 1 minute. I want to make sure that I thank the building committee, because among other things, we've had some really fun conversations here. No, seriously, so, you know, some observations and concerns raised by members of the building committee that really had us dig in and look more closely at how we were handling storage, and have kind of evolved to this point, as Scott said, with a lot of work done by Mr. Poskin, Dr. Hershey, and administration and staff. But clearly, this is an example of how the process works best. You know, there are a lot of decisions that we as the administration are charged with, and the input and the feedback that we get here helps to inform, and in some instances really helps to, you know, helps to evolve the thinking, and that's what it's done here. So thanks.
I would also add that the mayor's time in the classroom was valuable because he, not only did he take your questions and send them right back to the staff and administration, he came up with a series of very detailed questions on his own that ultimately had to be answered. So thanks to everybody who was involved in that process. I would say that after it was determined that the most viable solution, although you can make arguments on both sides, the most viable solution in terms of locating a fixed storage area for the students became the sort of student socialization and circulation areas, i.e. the hallways. I hesitate to call them the hallways because keep in mind that all of the areas outside the classroom are really considered part of the learning environment as we're formulating these teams. And we have nooks all throughout the hallways where the hallway gets wider, and it's intended that the students that come outside of the classroom now and do small group study will be able to do that in this new building with more area and more appropriate support. So one of the hesitations for locating those in the hallways, locating lockers in the hallways, was try to avoid disrupting that environment that the school administration wants to create, where students can operate, can study, can do small group work in the hallways. So as it wasn't just a simple decision about, oh yes, we'll move them to the hallways, it was about how to preserve the educational environment that we're trying to create outside the classroom. And so we had to consider where we could locate them in the hallways without compromising that. We also, as a reminder, have a lot of visual connections between that learning space outside the classroom and the learning space inside the classroom in the form of windows and transparency. So the last thing we wanted to do after moving through over a year of programming and talking about the importance of those issues was to cover all those transparencies up with lockers that blocked any kind of visual connection. So as a result of that, it came down to a rather detailed discussion on the exact size of a locker that would be required to avoid wasting any space, and additionally being able to make certain that we could accommodate those things that the students would be storing. And it also involved a bit of a compromise and kind of keeping a piece of the classroom storage, because ultimately it appears that a dedicated private lockable student storage area in the hallway is desired, but there's still also this desire to keep some coat storage for student coats in the classroom. So the ultimate solution that we're going to walk through and take a look at involves those lockers, if you will, although we're avoiding calling them that because they're really not a traditional locker where you have a very tall locker just lining a corridor. It's more of providing enough storage space to accommodate the students. And after a lot of study, the foam core model that you see on the floor that is in white there represents 2 storage units, each of which are 12 inches high, 12 inches deep, and 18 inches wide, that after building a series of models and testing items in them and talking to the school administration about them, became the size that accommodated all of the personal student items in a lockable fashion outside the classroom that we settled on for a good size. Now, the reason it's a good size is after a lot of discussion, it it was felt that that would accommodate all the student items and yet not be so large that it just took over the corridor and took over all of the educational functions that we were trying to incorporate into the hallways and corridors. And in addition to that, we'll be showing you an elevation in each classroom where we're proposing that coat hooks be located for overflow coats or students who want to actually hang their jackets up, or students that don't want to place their jackets in a folded position in a locker. So
Scott,
that was ultimately part of the
explain
solution.
why the prototype wasn't enough to bring, because it's not quite the size, but it's
Yes.
close.
The other thing that we have tonight, which can be very confusing, and we were joking earlier, we were going to tell the building committee that we were going to give all 1,500 students one of these with a handle on it, and they could put it anywhere they wanted to. But we decided not to go down that road. But this is purely
They are a little
mock-up,
heavy.
and it's not to demonstrate size at all. It's just to demonstrate the potential product material that we would propose utilizing, because this happens to be a phenolic resin material that's very hard, very durable, very solid. And this particular manufacturer, along with a number of others, make a really strong hinge for the locker door. And we really just have this mock-up so you can take a look at the physical nature of the quality of the material that would make up the individual storage units. And then we wanted some of the facilities, Mike and others related to the facilities, to have a chance to take a look at the hinge. They've already had this in their possession, but we wanted the building committee to take a glance at it. Again, it's not the proposed size. The proposed size is the larger, wider unit that you see on the floor, but it represents the materials that we may be utilizing as we continue to research how to do a very solid locker. It also happens to be a mock-up we were utilizing to have discussions with the staff and administration about exactly what that locking mechanism will be on every locker. That decision hasn't been made yet. Even the physical lockers that we'll be specifying hasn't been, the decision on that hasn't been made yet. We just brought this for a sample of quality, and we'll be looking at other manufacturers that may potentially find their way into the specifications to solve that challenge. The items that you see here are really already have been highlighted in my general summary, but we certainly wanted to maintain the small group breakout, and so this smaller size unit could be located in the hallway and do that. We wanted to integrate storage into that area, just as I mentioned, and that became the foam core mock-up became the ideal size for that. I'm going to let Troy speak just a minute to the slides on and describing kind of where those ultimately get located in the corridor areas as a result of all the discussions and adjustments that have taken place.
So as Scott mentioned, each neighborhood, this is an example of one of the neighborhoods. Each neighborhood gets 125 storage units, and you can see in yellow the area that is designated for the storage units within access from the corridor, and then there are a handful of storage units that access right directly inside the maker-builder space. This is just to give you a point of reference with the enlarged plan of the neighborhood. And this area here is the blow-up section you see in red around the perimeter. That's an enlarged version showing a series of lockers in the yellow portions, as I mentioned. As Scott was talking about, with the visibility between the corridor and the classrooms, that's maintained here in each of the classrooms. And also the enlarged small group work area has been maintained as well. So the integrity of the educational environment and what was originally discussed, designed, has stayed intact, and we were able to creatively insert the storage units within the corridor. You can see this elevation here is representative of the elevation that you see here. So you're looking at this wall along the corridor. Looking at the entry to this room is the door here. The units, the storage units located here, and we've got an enlargement of the elevation, so we'll see that in more detail. But you can see the tile along the corridor wall with the integration of the storage units, the window system between the corridor and the classroom, entry door, portion of the small group space located here, and then so on and so forth, moving down the corridor, and how the storage units integrate into that design. This is an enlargement of a portion of this corridor. So we'll take this center section right here, and this is the enlargement of that. You can see with the tile, as previously discussed, at 4'6", which works really well with the signage, all of the devices along the corridor, and you can see that these storage units integrate really nicely with the tile dimensions along the corridor, and the sizes, as Scott mentioned, were appropriate for the discussions that we had that occurred with the administration. This is a typical classroom. In the elevations within the classroom, showing the exterior wall here with glass, exterior glazing, one of the teaching walls here, the corridor wall with storage within the classroom. This is the access door, entry to the classroom, and then you have the glazing, or the visibility between the classroom and the corridor. Elevation 1, which is this one here, shows the exterior wall, shows the low bookcases, the window systems, as well as writable surface. Elevation 2 shows the access and visibility between the classroom and the small group space adjacent to the classrooms, between the classrooms, with writable surface. And as Scott mentioned, with the introduction of the coat hooks and coat storage is located in this area of the classroom, in each classroom. One thing that this did was provide a nice area for separation of the coats and a designated zone, but also allow for maximizing the writable surface along the wall for teaching. The elevation 3, which is the wall on the corridor side, the classroom side of the corridor, and this shows the storage within that system, both teacher storage, tablet powering, and device storage, as well as just general lockable storage, ADA sink with a bubbler, the visible connection, trash recycle station, and entry into the classroom. And then the final elevation, which is this elevation here, another teaching wall, which has the writable surface you can see here, as well as the interactive LCD TV located along that elevation, with tackable surface for display up above the writable surface.
Just quickly, with regard to the bus depot adjustments that we mentioned earlier, this is the original layout, just as we've looked at a number of times once it kind of settled down, but it was always located in that particular area, the corner of the site. We prepared, as part of the discussions with the mayor and the abutters, a number of different options for the possible adjustments to the bus depot. Ultimately, as a result of the abutters' feedback and continued discussions with them, the preferred option was this particular scenario, which you can see provides significant additional setback from the abutting property line to the start of the bus depot area. And we're showing some markers because there are areas that they had questions about in terms of specific setbacks, like the very nearest property line to the various nearest bus depot paved area, 65 feet, you can see there. But we also adjusted this parking area so that this side of the lot is for smaller vehicle parking, and this side of the parking lot is for fully stacked, full-size bus parking, essentially moving all of the full-size buses to the far side of the depot, taking advantage of a notch right here that existed in the natural contour of the site, where we're not in the no disturb zone, but we are taking advantage of being able to develop some parking in the buffer zone of the wetlands. And Troy mentioned earlier, we went back to the Conservation Commission. One of the reasons we went back to them is any minor modification to the site would have required going back to them, but certainly adjusting area within the wetland buffer zone required us to go back to them. They did like this plan very much because it consolidates, they being the Conservation Commission, because it also consolidates the area of disturbance. We can leave all of this area relatively undisturbed as part of this development, and the need to go into the buffer zone slightly in order to gain that additional no disturb area, they were certainly very satisfied with. We also shifted the proposed administrative building for the bus depot functions to this corner, because there's no real development in this area in terms of abutting properties. And so this area wasn't nearly as sensitive as, for example, this area. So the close proximity here wasn't a significant, wasn't sort of one of the high priorities of the abutters. Certainly they appreciated the fact that because there was nothing on this property, or no individual occupying this property, it's a chicken farm or a rooster farm or exotic plant area, and so none of the birds mind if we place the building there. So it got shifted to that location. Ultimately, it involved a small reduction in the number of employee parking spaces. I believe it was 4 or 5, not significant. And as a reminder, we already knew that we might have a few of the bus depot employees potentially parking in this area or kind of outside the boundary of the bus depot, and it's still kind of to be determined. It may ultimately be that this parking area fully satisfies all of that need, but worst case scenario, at certain times they may migrate an employee vehicle or two outside the lot. But we think in general, by consolidating the entire area into a smaller area and being able to pull it back from the property line, and it's even pulled back significantly from this rear property line, that it was overall good improvement. And I would just echo the mayor's comments and everybody's being thankful for everybody's input involved in that process, and thanks for setting up those meetings and it resulting in what everybody felt like was a good solution. I think, certainly their ideal solution might be a nice new soccer field here. Unfortunately, that won't fit in this area. We explained to the abutters that the building committee had already vetted those things out many times. And as the mayor suggested, I think they were very understanding in the end that many things had been looked at in the process and many solutions had been considered, and ultimately the only thing we wanted to do is try to balance the needs of the school department and the city with the surrounding property. So hopefully we were able to do that.
Excellent. Wait.
That is, that's all of ours. These beautiful construction slides, including destruction of steel, metal, and concrete, belong to Bob. So,
but before you go there, the next agenda item is the vote to submit 60% construction document package to MSBA.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I thought maybe the group wanted to hold that until Bob just updated us on the construction, what's been going on. But either way is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet.
It's appealing.
So, just about a month ago, I went to the joint meeting of the school committee and the city council, And this is what the site looked like at the end of March, on March 29th. So the gym was still standing. We had pretty much removed the main wing where the school offices used to be, which would be the piece right in front of you. And then you can see right across Bulge Street with the building being removed. As of yesterday, there's nothing left. You've got one machine that was cleaning up things. You had a little bit of concrete there right near the machine, which as of today is actually gone from the site as well. So again, back on March 28th, just about a month ago, still had some remnants of the lower level of the main wing there, down where kind of the maintenance had one of their shops. You can see a little bit to the right of the slide there of the front entryway as it stood. And then as of yesterday, pretty much just a pile of steel waiting to be loaded out, which was done yesterday. So as of today, we have removed all of the demolition debris from the site and taken that off the site and getting ready for the site and pile driving work. This slide may be a little fuzzy. I apologize for that. This is actually, you hear discussion about test piles, indicator piles. What will actually happen is the cylinder in the middle actually is a piston that sits on top of a pile that's actually driven on the site. And at both ends of this steel beam, there are actually anchors in the ground that are drilled to hold the beam down, and that piston will expand onto the pile and give us a bearing capacity for that pile. It will be a load test on the site. We're doing one of these test piles at each one of the 4 zones on the building, and this is the setup that we will be using starting next week. The threaded rods that you see here on the left-hand side of the picture, those were delivered to the site yesterday. So the components of this piece, this apparatus, are all coming together to get us into that schedule of doing these test piles next week, provided that somebody can do something about the weather. This is just a quick update on the overall schedule. What I've tried to do here is I've tried to put in blue. I apologize, this came out so small. But here, about a third of the way, quarter way down the page, was our original anticipated schedule for abatement and demo. We had kind of globally said January, February, March, it was our target for completing the abatement and demo of the building. We did go a little bit into April, primarily for a couple of reasons. One was the underground storage tank on site. When we removed the tank, there was some material underneath the tank that you had some petroleum smell to, so we had to segregate that, test it. We covered it. Thankfully, those tests came back negative, so we disposed of that material as regular site excavated material, and there were no additional costs associated with that. The other item that we dealt with in abatement and demo is when we were removing the slab for the gymnasium, we found some black damp-proofing mastic on the underside of the slab. Don't know how they got it there, but we found it in between layers of the concrete. That is historically a potential area for contamination, for asbestos contamination. So again, we segregated that, we tested that, we dealt with AI3's environmental consultant to get that testing result back. Luckily, that came back negative as well. It came back negative for asbestos. So that was that concrete was crushed, disposed of as ordinary construction debris from the site. Each one of those testing and verification procedures took about a week to do. So that's where it put us into April on the abatement and demo. The other dates here, the targeted dates, we haven't moved any of our milestone dates. As has been said, we're out to bid right now on the foundation package, on the remaining site work, and on the structural steel package. So that's out to bid right now. We're expecting bids 2 weeks from tomorrow on those. We are in the submittal and paperwork process right now. This was our original target taking up basically the April, May, and June timeframe for pile driving. We're in the submittal process right now, getting the paperwork approved. We've got the site work, which is pretty much varying every single day. 2 weeks ago, you could go out there and the site was dry, it was beautiful, you'd never know that there was 60 feet of clay under the site. Go out there today with a little bit of rain yesterday, a little bit more rain today, and the site is right back to being very difficult to manage. So we're actually making the call on a day-to-day basis, how much we disturb, making sure we don't make things worse by some of the areas that are protected under existing pavement. So this week, the site contractor is focusing primarily on site demolition, taking out old curbing, taking out the trees, getting the new erosion controls put in as of Friday, and getting that pad for the drilling rig set up for next week. We took a look at the weather forecast. Rain is predicted for every day the rest of this week. As we've been working with Mike Collins for months, as soon as you add water to that site, it becomes a completely different site and can completely trap equipment. We've gotten loaders stuck out there. The city had a backhoe get stuck out there. So we're trying to avoid that, and just by waiting a day or two, let things dry out and jump on top of it and get that taken care of. The key point, as Mark mentioned earlier, is that we are still on track to start our foundations on July 1st. We've built a little bit of buffer in there to the pile driving work, and we're doing it by phases. So we'll do the Zone 1 area, which is the 4-story building closest to Cabot Street. That gets done first, put all the piles in, and then we'll be in a position, contracts will have been awarded, we'll get our rebar designed, submitted, fabricated, and shipped to the site. So we'll still be in that position to start foundation construction on July 1. And none of the other dates on this schedule, this is my original schedule from last year, none of the other dates have changed, have been pushed out, have been affected at all by the little hiccups that we've been dealing with because of the weather and some of the abatement and demo items. So we are still on track, we're still confident. We're hoping for better weather in July and this summer, and we'll keep ahead of it. Any questions?
Questions for Bud? Bill, where's the steel coming from?
Structural steel is out to bid right now. The steel for the piles themselves was made in Arkansas, went into the factory on April 10th. They started rolling the steel. The shorter lengths have been delivered by truck. One truck is already in Haywood Baker's yard in Rhode Island. The second truck is expected to be shipped directly to the site next week. And the longer piles, the Zone 3 and Zone 4 piles that are over 85 feet are coming by rail car and should be in Billerica in about 2 weeks. We don't need those for another 6 or 8 weeks, but those are on the road as well.
Are you planning on having all the steel available to you by July 1st, or is it coming in lifts?
All of the pile steel will be on site probably by June 1st. Yep. And then the structural steel bids out in 2 weeks. What we're hearing in the marketplace is that the Canadian dollar is making it very difficult for the American steel producers to compete with some of the Canadian steel costs right now. Most of the questions we've been seeing in the bidding process are coming from the Canadian steel fabricators. We had a very positive experience on another AI3 job in Franklin that I did before going to Peabody with a steel fabricator out of Connecticut. They did their own fabrication and erection, and we're hoping to work with them again, but depends on what happens with the dollar and with the exchange.
So all that after shop drying process and detailing and everything else is going to be after they have their 2-week shutdown in Canada?
Our target for structural steel for the building is Labor Day, so yes. Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Bob? Okay, thank you, Bob, very much. So that does now bring us to the vote, and this is a vote to submit the 60% construction document package to MSBA. I would, for a motion, make that vote.
So moved.
And second? Thank you. Any discussion on that? Discussion, question? Okay. Is this a vote that we need to Is it a vote by hands or a vote by roll call?
No, it's a vote by hand.
Sure of that?
Yes.
Okay, good, good, good. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all very much for that. All that's left on the agenda is other business. I do want to make you aware of one gathering that we want to ask you to participate in. As you know, Agostini Bacon is building the Higgins Middle School in Peabody, and we're looking to go over there for a visit and tour in early June, to which we'll be inviting the City Council, the school committee, and members of the school building committee. So we're trying to nail down that date, and we will let you know as soon as we know. So hopefully everybody can make arrangements to join, but certainly as many people as possible. And the Higgins is a grade 6 through 8 middle school, which at least for a little while will be the largest middle school in the state. You folks have been building it for a little while, and it'll be largely complete by the time we walk through it.
Correct. And you'll have the opportunity to see things like the epoxy terrazzo flooring. We have that not throughout the building over there, but we have it in the cafeteria in the main lobby. So different things like that you'll be able to see and see what we've been able to do in the last year and a half.
Okay. Any questions about that? Good. So we'll let you know as soon as we know what the date is. Are there any other issues or questions that anybody wants to bring up? Yes, Maria.
After our last meeting on March 8th, a few of us had a conversation with the superintendent, and maybe it should have been with you, that we're looking for a website with some of these great photos that Bob had and the minutes of these meetings and some status updates so the general community can see besides via BevCam. Where is that right now?
So what I've started using our site better, but we really need to look at whether it's on our site, which it can be, and it becomes a growing document. It's time to have the growing document because we have so much. So the presentations have all been going up on our website at this point, but if we want to disaggregate it out, so you just click on it and you can go to all of the documents, we can still do that. We can still host that on our site. Or the city can host it on their site. Or both.
So people could search and see.
We have the capabilities and we now have the material. I wouldn't want to post those because I don't think we have enough memory capacity for those. But it really is time, and you know things are beginning to develop on a regular basis. So I think it's really important that people see at least the visuals.
Okay. Todd?
With respect to the bus depot building, utility companies were there. There's been very little discussion about what it is. Is it as simple as an office trailer that has a lab and a coffee station, or is it a formal structure? Is this the wrong forum for that?
Not at all.
Okay. So what's the intent of that building? Is it simple office and lockers for, maybe not lockers?
Personal storage.
Sorry. You know, is it you know, what's the intent of that structure?
At the design development stage, none of the estimators really had anything set aside as far as budget goes for that building. So we actually had the idea of why not take a look at a double-wide office trailer that we can use during construction. We can, you know, mobilize it to the site, use it for the year and a half, and then relocate it over to the other section. I'm actually going to be trying to reach out to the school transportation folks this week to take a look at a floor plan that we've identified, and we'd be talking about a 4-foot frost wall foundation underneath the unit, water, sewer. It has a handicap accessible bathroom. It has a data room in it. It has a lobby area for the folks to come in and check out. It has private offices. So we think it's a very cost-effective way to provide, you know, essentially, I think it ends up being I think it's 24 by 60 feet, something like 1,200 square feet of space. Ramp, covered walkway, stairs, provide all the ADA access that we need at an economical price to meet that without having anything in the budget at the design development stage, but we're carrying a little bit now to make that happen.
So essentially, you're going to provide a sort of a real foundation with a temporary skin as a double wide. I mean, nothing's more permanent than a temporary building, in my experience anyway. But that's great. Thank you very much for that answer. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking. What's the intent of that footprint? Thank you.
Jennifer?
I have a question about the bus depot. Are there any requirements for exhaust fans or any need for any type of exhaust in that area?
I think the only limitation is the state law on idling of vehicles on school property. I don't believe there's any other requirements beyond that.
Yeah.
There's no building, so. There's no, the buses are outside.
Right, right. I just didn't know adjacency-wise to the neighbors if there was any.
No.
Okay.
I have one quick
Yes,
question.
Joe.
It's on the bus depot also. I know that you had mentioned in the presentation that there was a concern about, I'm presuming, setting everything back was also not so that everything was, immediately adjoining their properties, but I'm presuming that some thought was given to positioning that building so it would act as a sound buffer between the parking lot and the neighbors, or were they opposed to that, or?
Yeah, I think that doing that would place it closer to them, and it's such a small building, and as a double wide, it wouldn't provide much. I mean, keep in mind that we're already around the entire perimeter of that area. What we're proposing on this boundary that you see right here that has the attached green line is both a wall, a wooden fence that's 8 feet high, and then on the abutter side of that fence, a series of evergreens that would grow up very densely. So we explained to them that after that evergreen buffer gets some density to it, just a couple of years of growth, the only thing you would see from the abuttering property lines is, even if you could see through those, you would see the wooden fence behind it. So there's already a nice visual barrier there, and as a result of moving away from the property line, we're also not cutting into that area, excavating into that area like we were previously. As you may recall, when we were up in this zone, because the grade is going up here, we were excavating into this and using a small retaining wall around the perimeter. That no longer has to exist as a result of moving down the grade. So we've moved down grade essentially from the elevation that exists at the property line, and at the same time we've expanded this wall, the fence, the solid wood fence, and the green buffer that comes around the perimeter of it. So
the neighbor's concern was more about seeing it than hearing it? Or was it both?
Well, I think we said quite frankly to them that at the point in time when those buses or vehicles are running there, it's no different than them going down the highway. Yes, you can hear a vehicle. If the windows were open in here, we could hear vehicles going down the street. But in terms of the duration of that and how limited it is, and now how far away we've moved from those properties, it becomes a reasonable thing to deal with.
Good.
Jennifer, and then Joe.
Are you suggesting that the buses don't idle longer in the winter months?
Well, they do. They can.
no, they
On a
do.
really cold day, they
They
can
do.
idle longer.
But they'll also be plugged in,
Okay,
so they need to.
what is along, I guess, I'm not sure if it's the south side. There's a fence on the north side, but what about?
In which area, Jennifer?
The whole place.
I'm going to say bottom of the plan. Yep.
This area is the double stacked area, meaning you stack two buses in here, which is slightly less desirable for the bus depot, but certainly a common practice, and it allows us to move all of those buses that would be started, for example, in the winter, and may idle for a few minutes during that time period. It allows us to locate them at the southernmost side of the parking lot.
And is there a fence as well?
Yes, there's a fence around the entire perimeter, and then a chain link fence exists even in this area going back out to the school drive, comes right around here, goes right out to the gate. Where the green is, that represents the solid wooden fence that I was describing. Okay. So on this boundary, and then on the back boundary, and then this abutting boundary to Auburn Road and to Bradford is the continuation of that wooden fence, and then the green buffer that I talked about on the outside of the fence, on the abutter side of the fence.
So there's no concern with idling buses in that area in an enclosed area with a fence, as opposed to idling buses at the bottom of the plan with just a chain link fence, so that the exhaust can exhaust out?
No, it's, I mean, it's such a large area
Okay.
in terms of the expanse of it. And there would be no concern about idling the vehicles in that area, for example, because it's such a large, expansive area. The fence is not that significant of a boundary. And it's not, when I say solid fence, you know, it's an overlapping slat fence. So visually it appears solid, but it does have some, you know, it does have the ability to have airflow through it and around it.
Joe, then Todd, then Mrs. Silverstein.
2 questions. The bus depot building that we're talking about, that top corner, how close is that top corner to the property line?
The fence, as I recall, was in this corner. The actual fence that we were talking about inside was about 10 feet off the property line. The building itself is probably more like 25 feet off the property line.
I know that the deed restriction about building a structure within 10 foot of the property line.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Second question is, knowing that kids can be kids, are the kids going to be able to get behind that fence to those areas that aren't disturbed? You know, to the back of the bus depot?
Short answer, yeah. If they can access it from the neighborhood.
I mean, well, from the school property though. I'm just wondering if there might be a security concern.
Raise a wire.
There's no way.
It appears the answer is yes as you look at it.
Yeah.
There's a visual screen back there. You know, it's an unsupervised area. So.
Right.
Electric shock fence.
Yeah. Minefield. So we kind of, the unasked question is, do we want to try to secure it off and not let anybody back there? Yeah. Okay. All right, food for thought.
You know, also, there's a fair amount of area back there. It's, you know, it's almost a shame. You know, I understand why everything's been moved away, but it's now sort of lost to the property.
Understood. From the point of view of the neighbors, it's preserved. Well, it's not legally theirs. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Todd?
A couple things briefly. I think a lot of the questions coming about the depot itself is the lack of understanding exactly how the thing functions. Obviously, kids go to school in the morning, come home in the afternoon, so there's those 2 windows. But I think that's just to, and if I'm wrong, please speak out, but I believe most of our questions are because we're not 100% understanding what goes on in that space. Uncharacteristically, I'm going to ask a question about budgets, and it's obviously for a future response, but you've done a lot of work on the storage issue, and the tiling, if I recall, was also a large discussion in this room with respect to how much tile, the height of tile, all those things. Budget-wise, where does it all shake out? And I know it's still a moving target, but those are the kinds of things that, as we roll forward in this process, I'm sure those will come out.
Well, certainly those are valid questions. They're things we've been talking about as part of the design construction management team. Our hope, and we'll know for certain when we see the cost estimates this Thursday, our hope was that the introduction of the storage units in the hallways, displaced enough of the tile that we were able to move its overall height up without adding any additional quantities. And so we think we're in a relatively safe realm there. And then we think that the movement of those outside of the classroom and into the corridors resulted in a net cost savings, because some of that was being built more or less as custom casework / cabinetry when it was in the classrooms, and now we believe we're going to be purchasing off-the-shelf modular lockers. So our hope is that we're better than cost neutral. Our belief is that we're at least cost neutral, and in the process got the higher tile height in the hallways and corridors. So we'll see. We'll find out.
We'll see.
Soon.
That's awesome. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Madam President?
Back to the bus depot. When we went on that site visit and walked around, we saw that that area was very overgrown, and so now there's more of that space. Will that space be cleared so that the evergreens will be visible, or not? And then if it is cleared, right now the city and the schools have not maintained that area at all. Would that be something that would have to be taken care of by the city?
I think there was, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, you go, Mike. Then I'll follow.
I think if I understood the plan, let the evergreens start to grow, and we would slowly start to manage that space, because the neighbors, really feel like whatever's there, it's growth that, buffers them from the site. So let the evergreens get established, and then slowly, one of our concerns is there's a lot of bittersweet vine in there that's going to be killing all the mature trees. The mature trees there are not by any stretch feature trees. They're largely just scrub brush that grew very tall. So, we're going to have to start to manage that, and that also means start to look at the future of it and planting some new trees that'll be hopefully more of a feature type tree out there, and eventually I think it'll be transitioned into a nicer space. But quite frankly, going in there and clearing it would be too much of a shock to everyone and wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I think we'll slowly pick it up and make it into a nicer space over time.
My concern is spending money on all the evergreens to be choked out by what's there now.
They'll get plenty of sun from even from the parking lot side. They're going to be big enough that they'll poke up over the 8-foot fence as it is, and it's not that dense in there. It's right. Largely there's largely the understory is largely open, save for the bittersweet. So
poison ivy is not an option.
No, it's very much alive and well.
Yeah.
Fortunately, none of us have poison ivy after walking back there.
Yeah. Or Lyme disease, or
not that we know of.
Not that we know.
Yeah.
Although that was a while ago.
It was freezing that day.
It was good and cold. Yeah.
Mayor, if I could just one last point on the buses. A number of years ago, the schools availed themselves of a grant program and retrofitted all of the older buses with exhaust catalysts. So even the older buses, which are slowly, or not very slowly, being rather quickly weaned out of the fleet, have been already retrofitted with exhaust catalysts. So they're more efficient than they normally would be. And the new buses, the new diesel engines in the last 5 or 8 years are markedly different than what we all grew up with. They don't sound the same. They're much quieter. There's virtually nothing that comes out of the tailpipe with the modern buses. The school department just purchased 5 new ones. And if you stood next to it when it's running, anyone who drives a modern diesel truck, they'll tell you they've turned the key while the engine was running because they didn't know it was running because they're that quiet. And you don't smell diesel exhaust at all anymore. It's a totally different animal. So that bodes well. Each year as the buses get replaced, the clunkers will go out of the fleet. Even those have exhaust catalysts on them, which helps dramatically reduce the particulate matter that comes out of the exhaust. And the new buses are basically water vapor that comes out of the exhaust now. So it's a totally, totally different machine.
Oh, Bill.
This has nothing to do with the bus depot. I was jotting down some notes when you were going through some of the features, and you had mentioned sync in some of the classes. Are those going to be eyewash equipped?
The sinks will not. They have a bubbler for supplying like a drinking fountain.
I'm just thinking like in these innovation areas where they may be playing with, again, I'm not up to speed with what they play with these days, but, you know, anything that could be, you know, splashed in their eyes, whatever, an eye wash being a safety feature. Just curious.
We did go through with the administration as well as the staff, any materials, any liquids that they would be using, and the liquids are harmless in general. So there wasn't any need to put in eye wash stations within all of the classrooms in the building. Even the maker spaces, as an example, didn't need that expense or requirement.
Okay.
Jennifer?
On that note, I had a recent request in an art room to install an eye wash at the sink. So, because from what I understood, they had paint that had chemical involved, so I don't know if
we can reach back out and ask that question.
Something that you might want to reconsider.
Oh. One more.
Bill.
Again, just little notes, the doors that you were talking about. I did a project for MIT, and we had a lot of problems with the doors because grown adults prop them open with books and all sorts of stuff. I can imagine part of the specifications of the doors that they were reinforced. They were hollow metal doors, but they had special reinforcing at all basically the four corners of the door, so they wouldn't rack, and also extra reinforcement at all the hinges. I haven't had a chance to go through, read a spec or anything. I'm presuming
it does include that. It sure does. Yep.
But
Both of those items.
I will caution you, if they take wedges and kick the wedge under the door to keep it open, you're going to rack it. I don't care what you put there for hinges.
No, I agree.
Okay.
I agree, but
it happens every job.
Yep.
And then then the veneer starts to peel right where the wedge is.
Well, that was my other question. Are they hollow metal doors or are they mineral core?
There's solid core veneer doors.
Any door with a closer's got a continuous hinge on it, hold open closer.
Yep.
So you don't have to use a chalk block, but, you know, chalk blocks are the bane of our existence.
Yep.
We all walk around, pick them up and throw them in the trash.
Yep. You put a nice door in and a year later you're replacing it because people do stuff to them.
Jennifer?
Back to the cubbies. One quick question. Is that size a standard size with the locker manufacturer, or is that custom?
It is a standard size. They make, as long as you stay in the 6-inch increments vertically and horizontally within reason. I mean, they consider it a standard.
Would you consider getting a price to do it out of manufactured casework? Well, the estimator has the drawing.
We could certainly do that because we're operating as CM at risk. So
what does that mean?
That means that manufactured casework would mean that somebody is literally taking either a plywood panel or an OSB panel that is veneered and constructing it out of that, like the panels that probably make up this or make up the desk station there, or the panels that make up the end of the bookshelf right there, and compose locker units out of those instead of this solid plastic.
Less durable, as durable, more durable?
You can make arguments both ways. I mean, certainly the newest phase of locker is going to this solid material where it's not made of layers and you can't delaminate it and you can't crack the edges and peel it back. But we have seen them made, certainly in many college environments, they're made out of manufactured casework like Jennifer described. So we can easily have Agostini reach out to a couple of different vendors and suppliers and ask that question if there's potential savings around
So for example, all of the cabinetry in typical classrooms, that's manufactured casework.
Which takes more of a beating? Well, you know, what's in classrooms or
We're certainly
or a
going
locker.
in this direction because we think that this solid plastic, I'll really use the generic term, solid plastic locker may take more of a beating. A lot of elementary schools, middle schools, high schools are starting to utilize this, but for a long period of time, especially cabinetry in the classroom, and even now, certainly as Jennifer describes, the cabinetry that will be going into these classrooms is considered manufactured casework, but where it's handled more by the staff and administration and not so much by the students. It's one of the reasons that the traditional tall locker is made out of metal, so that it can take more abuse.
Absolutely. One last thing, I swear. You talked about placing containers in the maker spaces. Are the maker spaces intended as like a sort of a home room? Are they considered an extension of the boulevard?
I'd say they will be the last ones used.
Yeah.
We insisted that they provide locker space for 1,500. So, you know, if we get to that
Gotcha.
census, to that population, we'll be using them. We may not be using them in any given neighborhood in a given year. They may not be in use at all.
And using them in the maker space means that when we're not using them for that storage, it's
Makerspace.
added storage for the maker space. So,
Thank you.
One last question. I want to ask about this. That looks big enough to me to put a backpack in. So, you know, a kid has a backpack. And I guess this goes back to the discussion you made earlier about, you know, having coat hooks to put their coats in classrooms or whatever. And I'm presuming this is just to put their backpack in?
So Bill, our expectation is that if not upon opening of the school, certainly soon after, there won't be textbooks going home with students.
Right.
We'll have licenses for online textbooks for the most part. So to the extent that backpacks don't go the way of the dinosaur, to the extent that L.L. Bean and Columbia and others want to remain relevant, they'll be streamlining their backpacks.
Okay.
They won't be those big hulking things that 5 textbooks and a binder go in.
Okay.
So I think the expectation is more that these may need to hold a binder or two on a regular basis. They may hold a bag lunch. They may hold gym stuff. A coat jammed in there, but if the student doesn't want to jam the coat, they can hang it in the room.
Okay.
Such.
Just trying to understand how it came to that from the conventional.
add real quickly, over the course of the last month since we've done this, I've been at McGraw-Hill. We were with Pearson today, and we actually have looked at Summit Learning. In each and every case, that is where it's heading, and there is nothing that you carry around other than whatever device you're accessing the instructional materials for. So it actually is confirming that they're probably moving a little faster now than we would have anticipated to. So it's cool.
The textbook companies are still behind the curve.
Yep.
You know, but they're finally getting it.
Or they'll be out of business.
As part of this process, we did find, and we don't certainly have to go into it because we're putting the storage units in the hallways, but we did find a number of articles on schools that are going without any lockers in the hallways, and all the reasons why they're doing that, and all of them have to do with technology sort of taking over. But ultimately, there were plenty of justifications for keeping some smaller version of a personal storage area, so that's where we are.
Judy?
I raised my hand.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
What's that?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Did you just make a motion to adjourn?
I did, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Will somebody second that?
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.